Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor Tom McKenna, and with me this episode, our executive art director Mike Pekovich.
Hey guys.
Special projects editor Matt Kenny.
Happy New Year.
Our web producer Ben Strano.
Yep.
And Jeff Rose, our video manager.
Hello. Audio.
Finally got Jeff on the air. Before we get started, I just want to remind folks that registration is open for Fine Woodworking Live 2017, which is set to take place April 21st to the 23rd at the Southbridge Hotel and Conference Center in Southbridge, Massachusetts. Sign up now to take advantage of our early bird pricing. If you register before January 15th, you'll save $130. For details and to sign up, go to finewoodworkinglive.com. Now let's get to our first question. This one comes from Peter. And Peter says, I'm buying a new house and will be setting up my next shop from scratch after we move in. I expect that my hand tools will be boxed up for possibly 6 months or longer. I'm planning on storing the tools in polypropylene storage boxes with lids. Do you think that it's necessary to put silica gel packets in with the tools? The lids are pretty tight, and the boxes will be stored in a heated basement.
It's not a horrible idea. I don't know if you need it, but if you got it.
Couldn't hurt.
Yeah, it won't hurt to do that.
I mean, really what you're going to get rust from more often than not is a change in temperature as opposed to overall humidity level. So if it's a heated basement, you're not going to be having a lot of condensation on the tools to begin with, but because it is a basement and it's possibly slightly more humid, not horrible.
And you might want to try to keep that hand tool box or tote off the floor. Maybe if you have a shelf, just keep it away from the concrete, which could, accelerate condensation with the heating and cooling.
Yeah, and you could always maybe forego silica packets, which I don't know. I guess you could probably buy those on Amazon or something.
Yeah, you can buy
get
them.
one of those little buckets of what do they call it, like damper it or something.
Yep.
And just put that inside the canister or inside the tote, and rather than but you can buy silica on Amazon.
Yep.
Do you buy that often?
No, but the only reason I know that is that I did an article on rustproofing.
That's right.
Years ago, and I did actually have to buy them. You can buy them in packs of 12 to 200, depending on what you're,
You can get bigger ones that you can actually reuse. I think you put them in the microwave or something.
Them. Yeah. Yeah.
There's also a thing that I know Lee Valley sells. I think it's called the Goldenrod. I think that's what it's called. But it was made initially, I believe, for gun vaults or like gun cases. And I think it plugs in, and it's like a little dehumidifier. I'm not sure how it works, but you could get something like that and pop it in there too, and run up your electric bill.
Yeah.
Oh, it actually plugs in.
I think so. Huh. I'm not positive. I haven't looked at it in a long, long time. And I think it's called the Goldenrod.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next question. This one comes from Philip. He says, hi, fellas. I'm curious to hear what each of your most used chisel sizes are in general, and what advice you can offer to newer woodworkers regarding which sizes to purchase and in what order. I'm not looking to buy a set, but rather buy chisels one or two at a time. I have the proper waterstones and enough experience to achieve truly sharp edges. It's a good question.
It's a good question.
He was also, he had a couple of side questions about, he's looking at Japanese chisels more seriously than just a standard bevel edge chisel. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, I think, beyond sizes.
I think for sizes, what I would do myself is, and I actually did this when I started to, because initially I bought Marple's chisels.
Mm-hmm. Right, me too.
And I bought a couple of other chisels here and there. But then when I started to get serious about chisels, I started to buy Lee Nielsen chisels, which I really like. One at a time, two at a time as I could. And the way I went about it was this. I sat down and looked at some dovetails I've cut and looked at the type of pin sockets that I normally have. What size are they? What's their widest, at the widest base? At the base, how wide are they? And I went by that to decide, okay, I need to get a 3/16 inch chisel because usually those things are about a 1/4 inch. And if I get a 3/16, it'll fit in there nicely. And I also wanted a wider chisel for paring, so I went with a 3/4, I believe. And I might have gotten another one initially too, like an 1/8 inch, because I use an 1/8 inch of a chisel a lot as well. So I think for me the answer to the question is, well, sit down and think about the work that you do, and figure out what size chisels you need for that. And if you cut dovetails, you need one to fit in between the tails into that pin socket. And so you need to figure out, okay, well, what's the smallest that I make those? And that should dictate one of your first chisels, so that you can cut your dovetails. And then I would go with something wide. And I think I would even want to go, Mike, with like a 1.5 or 2-inch wide chisel in addition. So that would be my first three, that really narrow one for pin sockets, like a 3/4 inch for general paring, and then like a 1.5 or 2-inch wide chisel as well.
Yeah, my most used chisel is the 1/2 inch width. And then I've got for paring, I've made a couple skew chisels left and right. But I bought my chisels in sets. I didn't buy them one at a time. I bought the Marples like Matt did, then I upgraded to a set of Veritas just last year. But yeah, 1/2 inch is my probably most used size, and got a 3/4 inch, but that's about it. And
I kind of ran across this problem when I was setting up my travel case, because while I have like a bunch of chisels and a bunch of sizes, when it came down to, okay, what do I want to take with me? What do I have room for to take? I think the basic size for me, if you're looking for a set of bench chisels first, it would be like 1/4, 3/8, 1/2, and 3/4. It's a 4 chisel set. Yeah. You can get a 1 inch, but I never end up using the 1 inch. And to Matt's point, I'd rather skip a 1 inch and get something maybe closer to like an 1.5 inch, because it's really sort of a separate tool. We've talked about that in the past, but it's almost functions almost like a block plane.
Yeah.
It's really good for paring. It's good for general work. I keep mine really, really sharp. Only use it for paring. I never pound on that thing with a hammer or mallet or anything.
Do you sharpen it differently? Different angle?
Not really. Just keep it sharp. And then beyond that basic set of 4, I have a pair of skew chisels, which were just some cheapy Buck Brothers from Home Depot that I ground sort of opposing angles on to get into half-line dovetail sockets. So those are nice things. And then to Matt's other point, for really skinny things, I do have a set of Japanese dovetail chisels. So the cross-section is triangular, and I have one that's 1/8 of an inch and one that's 1/4. I usually keep those around because just the times when you're doing really small dovetails, like in really tiny drawer sides, and that kind of stuff, something really thin does come in handy.
Yeah.
But basically that set of 4, 4 bench chisels, 1/4, 3/8, 1/2, 3/4, plus a wider one. I think that's a starting set. And then from there, start to buy them as you need them. Some people get just a single fishtail chisel for the half lines instead of the pair of skews.
Would you recommend a Japanese chisel for a newbie woodworker, or is it too fussy to sharpen and prep?
It's a tough question. I sort of eased my way into Japanese chisels. I started with Western style chisels, an old set of Freud chisels. I moved up to a set of bar chisels, which are really nice. I love old Witherby chisels, so I have a bunch of old there. And you can beat up Western chisels a little bit, because as you're sort of prying and scraping with a Western chisel or chopping, you'll sort of turn a wire edge that you can then sharpen. But Japanese chisels is much, much harder steel, and rather than sort of turning an edge, you'll actually fracture the edge off. And so they really need to be used in a slightly different way. But as my technique has sort of progressed, I find that I'm reaching for Japanese chisels first, mainly because they are really sharp. And the way that I work, I tend to work in a fashion that keeps my chisels sharper. And also I'm more careful not to be doing any really heavy prying or anything like that with a chisel, unless I'm opening up a paint can.
Yeah. It's because I know you read that article, or is it a handwork, about how to use your chisels to keep them sharp.
Yeah.
And I noticed that myself, that I don't ever pound on chisels anymore. I don't
either.
It's like I'm always paring, because you're removing most of the waste with some other tool that does the job better. And I use it for paring. And usually if they're sharp, just hand pressure, you know, or putting the chisel handle into my shoulder and just pressing down like that is enough to sever the grains.
Yeah. I do smack on mine with a hammer quite a bit, but even when I do, I'm taking really thin slices, even when I am striking it. And I think that's the key to keeping it a little bit sharper.
Yeah, I mean, I was just using my chisels yesterday for some hinge mortises, and the only time I tapped the chisel at all with my mallet was when I was defining my scribe line, you know, around the blue tape that I actually used. But I don't really pound chisels anymore, and I think it's because I actually learned how to sharpen better. So.
Yeah. So I wonder now if I went back. I do think now. I mean, I basically have every Lee Nielsen bench chisel, you know, even the 1-inch one, which I really like. They're all fantastic chisels. But now I wonder, like, I could probably get by with like 2 bench chisels, a really wide chisel, and then I have like 3 Japanese chisels, paring chisels.
Okay.
That I would want to keep.
Yeah.
You know, that are push chisels, not for hitting at all. But I don't. What are they? I mean, they complain. I bought all of them.
Yeah,
you know, it's not like I'm going to send them back.
I bet none of them you would actually be quick to get rid of at this point.
No, I would not get rid of any of them.
No. Right.
Because occasionally it's like, oh, I do need this size here or that size there.
Right.
Yeah. So I wouldn't get rid of them.
All right. Well, let's get to our first segment of the cast. It's time for our all-time favorite technique of all time for this week. Do you want to start us off, Matt?
Oh, sure. Mine was just yesterday. I was in the shop yesterday, and right now I'm making 2 identical tee boxes. One of them is for a customer, and one of them is for a gallery exhibition. And each one has 3 drawers. So I have 6 drawers that all need to be dovetailed. And normally I will cut dovetails either by hand, which you can do quickly, or I will cut the tails at my bandsaw and then route the pins, which can also be very quick. I like the bandsaw because you can do spacings that are identical to hand-cut dovetails because the blade's so thin.
Right.
But there's always a lot of cleaning up, paring left to do after that. There's always, you know, to go back and do work with a coping saw and a chisel. So I wanted something faster. And so I borrowed from Ben Strano, who's sitting over there, a specially ground blade from Forest so when you angle it over, it cuts off basically a flat baseline. And actually, Ben got that blade from you, right?
Yes, he did.
He did. And Ben may never get it back from me.
That's my feeling.
He's going to have to make a choice. He's either going to get that blade back or the Tosho Adate book. He's going to get one of them back, but not both.
I'll take the blade.
I'm just kidding, Ben. I'll give them both back to you.
Someday.
So I've used that blade before because I borrowed it from Mike before, and it's great. So this time, you know, I took my time Friday, which I took off from work, and I made a nice sled to do this, and I got all my parts ready, and then I went to dovetail and cut the tails, and 20 minutes later, I was completely done.
Yeah.
All 6 drawers were completely done. There was no pairing to do, nothing. And they're ready to transfer to the drawer front and drawer back. And it is so fast and so unbelievably accurate.
Yes.
That it is, I mean, it's mind-boggling how good of a technique it is. And it kind of like I put it up on Instagram this morning, and I didn't really rail on it, but I kind of wanted to rail on this point that people, and I love hand tools. I love working with hand tools because it's quiet, it's contemplative, it's slow. You know, it sort of gets to this Zen thing where you're focused, and it's really nice.
Yes.
And you can listen to music and all this stuff, and it's pleasant. But there's nothing wrong with using a table saw to cut dovetails because it does it so well, so extremely well. and quickly and and efficiently.
Yes.
And it's like, so I kind of want to say, get over yourselves with the hand tools.
Yeah, that'll go over really well. Let's just say that.
It's going to go over great because
Matt's email address is.
But then there are people who, the reason they do woodworking, and they're mostly, it's like they're hobbyists, and the reason it was just totally for the process.
Yes.
And I understand that because I used to be that way, but unfortunately, I can't be that way anymore. I have to work quickly. And cutting 6 drawers worth of dovetails, whether it was at my bandsaw or with a handsaw, would have taken way longer, way longer. And now they're done, and they're nice, and I can move on. And the spacing is really nice too. It's not really that bad,
No, it's it's an 1/8 inch. Sort of throat at the narrowest part
of the pin socket,
which I think is fine. Some people will actually use a thin curved blade to get thinner, but yeah, just the speed. And also, one of the biggest time savers is the layout involved when you're hand cutting the tails.
Yes.
Versus if I'm doing multiple drawer parts of the table saw, I'll lay out just a tick mark where I want the pin sockets on a single piece. Make some tick marks on the fence of my sled.
Exactly what I did.
boom.
Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
You're knocking them all out. Then if you're really crazy, you start taping multiple parts together and bust out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was doing them in pairs.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I had already gone and fit each drawer part sort of individually. Like I fit the drawer fronts, and then I planed the drawer sides to match, and so they weren't all identical anymore. But I did them in pairs though, and it was really fast.
I got to do that table saw method once.
Someone commented that I don't know where it was. They said, Mike, it's like every single thing you make has a million dovetails. You must love cutting dovetails. It's like, no, I hate cutting dovetails. But I like them in my furniture. So I'm sort of, the fast, I would say the most efficient way, which means the fastest way to the result that I want.
Yeah.
Because you can say, well, a router jig is really fast, but I don't like evenly spaced things. I'm going to have to reset that for the fronts and the backs and the different sides, so that is a non-starter for me. But the table saw is that nice combination of really efficient, really, really fast, but really flexible to let you cut them where you want.
Yeah.
And go from there.
And see, if I'm making just one drawer, I'll typically do hand cut just because it's sometimes faster for me to do it that way. But when I have multiples, I've done, I stack the tails and cut them all on the bandsaw.
Okay.
So I just stack all the tail boards and go to town with them. But I haven't done the table saw method. So
Yeah. And just to finish the point I was making that, about woodworking and people enjoying it for the process. And I absolutely do enjoy the process of furniture making. I enjoy the entire process from picking lumber to milling lumber. And it doesn't really matter what machine it is for me, because when you're milling lumber, I'm not thinking about, hand plane. I'm thinking about grain and grain orientation and producing a board that's going to satisfy what I need it to do in the piece of furniture, right? And that's the process for me.
Yeah.
Is thinking about making a piece of furniture. But also ultimately, I'm like goal-oriented. So it's like I want to make a nice piece of furniture, and to some extent, I don't really care what tool I use to get there.
Yeah.
good.
That's just my manifesto for this morning.
Stamp it.
For this podcast. I just want people to know that I take woodworking seriously. That's what I want people to know. It's not all fun and games with Matt Kinney.
How about you, Mike?
This technique is one I've used a few times. I was in my shop this weekend making a tea box of all things. And I picked up this technique from John White, who was our once upon a time shop manager, who has a really brilliant take on woodworking because he was traditionally trained as a machinist. So he brought a lot of sort of machinist ideas and concepts to woodworking that as a woodworker never occurred to me, and I never read in traditional woodworking books, but I put to use all the time. So this is one of them. So I have a little tea box, dovetail box, of course, and it's got a little base. So these little sort of 3/8 inch wide members create little feet and a crossbar on the bottom. So I wanted to attach those to the box with screws. But I didn't want to go from the bottom of the base up because when you turn it over, I didn't want to see, screw holes and screw heads there. I wanted to screw through the inside bottom of the box into the base because it's going to have a liner, so that's all concealed. So here's the challenge. Easy enough in concept, but how do I locate the holes precisely while I'm drilling through the bottom of the box so they land exactly where I want them to land in this base? Because the parts are really thin. There's not a lot of margin for error to get these holes right. So the tip I got from John is you start by placing the base on the bottom of the box where you want it. You can either tape around it. In this case, I just use a light pencil line to basically mark the location of the final base parts. Took them off, and now I could drill from the bottom of the box, from the outside in with the drill bit exactly where I want my holes. So that's really easy. So now I can flip it over. I have holes on the inside of the box that correspond exactly to my base parts. Part one, that's really, really good. The second part of the technique, which I didn't learn from John, but still works really well, is now how do I get the base in place and hold it in place while I'm drilling from the inside of the box into the base without those parts moving around? For that, I just put the base parts back in place and put a little dot of CA glue along the edges of the piece. It wicks in, hit it with some accelerator. So the base is now glued in place just enough to be able to drill from the inside into those parts. And once that's done, you take a little hammer, give it a little smack, and the CA glue pops right off because it's really brittle. Clean up the parts. Now I have the hole precisely located on the box, precisely located in my base parts, and then I'm going about my business, and when it comes time to screw everything in, it's done.
Sweet.
Sounds good.
So,
Mr. White coming through.
yeah. So thanks, John.
Well, mine is pretty simple. I was getting ready to hang a door, and I had my hinge strip installed, and I was just getting ready to test the fit with the door hinge mortises and stuff. So I was trying to put the hinges into the hinge strip, and I realized that my opening was too narrow for the screwdriver that I had.
Oh, yeah.
And I know I have a stubby, Phillips head screwdriver somewhere, but of course I couldn't find it. So it was a miserable day yesterday, and I didn't feel like going back to the store or going to the hardware store to buy one screw. So I was trying to figure out a solution, and I looked over and I saw my mechanic's tool chest, and I realized, wait, I have a socket wrench. I've got a whole bunch of socket heads, and I have a whole bunch of Phillips driver heads. So I found the socket head that fit the appropriate Phillips driver, and it went right in. It was great. It was like
cool.
Super easy, and it was actually almost better than trying to put it in with the screwdriver.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Very cool.
I was very happy with that. I was like feeling like a genius yesterday.
Yeah, I have encountered that problem myself where, because I make small
Yeah,
things.
you must. What do you do?
Where I can't get a screwdriver. So actually, they make driver sets like that with a little ratchet. So I have a little ratchet that's maybe 6 inches long, ratchet driver, and it's in the head it pops in sort of standard hex head bits.
Right.
So it came with a bunch of little hex head bits. They're like 6-sided, right?
Yeah.
And they just pop in there, so it's really low profile, and you just go Richie, and it goes right in. So that's what I do. I do have a little thing like that, and we actually ran a review of one of those kits in T&M. Remember, it's a company in Connecticut that makes them.
Oh yeah,
JT.
Was it JT that did the review, or was it Raleigh? I can't remember.
I think Raleigh did the review, but John met the guy.
Yeah, they're up near Durham.
Yeah, they're near where John lives. Yeah, yeah. That's great. It's a great solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have to go back to the store, and I actually like it better than my stubby screwdriver anyway. So I may just keep on doing that.
Right on.
Well, let's move on to more questions. This one I didn't write the fella's name down. I apologize. Says, I'm thinking of building the Limburg-style coffee table featured in the February 2016 issue by Kevin Rodell. Kevin's using oak, but I was thinking of using pine. I was concerned that wood movement would be a problem in attaching and maintaining the tabletop, and I noticed he doesn't address that issue with the oak, simply attaching the top with wood screws. Can you explain that? Is the table too small to be a concern? Or is it that oak doesn't move much? I think he said he was using quarter-sawn wood. Is that why he isn't worried? I think in this case, I just went back and looked at the drawings, and what's different about Kevin's table is that, in a typical construction, you're going into aprons. You're attaching the tabletop to aprons, and there's typically a cross grain issue.
Yes.
But with Kevin's construction, there is no issue with that because of the way he builds those cutout inserts between the legs. How he orients the grain so it's all going in the same direction as the tabletop.
So
and he dovetails that rail that attaches the table into the into the panel and not the leg, so there's no cross grain movement. I'll have Ben post a picture of it, based on the drawing, but the grain direction is essentially the same.
Okay. Yeah, because it has sort of end panels that are perforated, but all that grain is running vertically which is in the same direction as the tabletop.
Yeah.
Cool.
He explains it much better than I can. That's why Mike teaches and I don't.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the pine idea?
I was about to say, can we please address something else in this question?
Well, yeah, because the notion of him wanting to make this table, which is traditionally white oak, out of pine. And I think everyone's first reaction, and mine was like, oh, well, my first thought was, no, pine is wrong. And sort of what I meant by, when I kind of examined that thought a little bit further, really sort of what it came down to is that if you change a wood, you're not just changing the color of a piece, you're changing really the nature of a piece.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, it's like, you're not going to have Kevin's table in pine. You're going to have a completely different sort of thing, which could be really cool. It's just not going to be the same.
Right.
So I found that sort of whether it's a box or a small piece that I've made multiple times and I'll make it out of different woods, it doesn't just change the color. It really becomes a whole different sort of thing. And I end up treating it and detailing it in a different way because I'm responding to the different woods I'm using. So make it out of pine, and it's going to be a lot different, and it could be something you really like, but that's okay.
It's funny because you mentioned that because we get people are proud of the work that they do, and we often get emails with photos of projects that people have built from the magazine, and in many cases they changed the wood. And it's completely different from what the original looks like. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But, some people just like to take risks and, go for it.
One thing that quarter sawn white oak is used traditionally with arts and crafts furniture. And I think the form of the furniture and the characteristic of the wood work really, really well together because arts and crafts furniture tends to be very spare, not a lot of ornamentation, a lot of flat parts, broad surfaces. So quarter sawn oak has two really important characteristics. The first is a ray fleck, which we sort of think of when we think of quarter sawn white oak, where it's got that sort of tiger stripe or kind of flame streaks going through it, which is really decorative effect on broad, flat surfaces. But I think another characteristic, which is even more important, is because it's quarter sawn, the grain itself is really, really tight and really straight. So rather than having the cathedrals of pine or cherry on these broad surfaces, you have a really tight, straight grain, which really helps to kind of enhance the form of the piece, the shape of the piece with this really tight, straight grain. And then you have this ray fleck, which gives it a sort of decorative effect. So I think that's where, especially with an arts and crafts piece, when you start to get away from quarter sawn white oak, you really start to get away from, I think, what works about that style.
Yeah, good point.
I wonder if people I wonder how often people think about the wood they use when they make something, outside of, because when I was starting out, what did I usually make my choice based on? What was cheap? I'll get soft maple, because soft maple is not that expensive, but it's still a hardwood. And now I give as much thought about the wood that I'll use and the cut of the wood as I do about things like joinery and other stuff, and the design. And it is, well, as you're saying, the wood that you choose to make a piece of furniture has a huge impact on what that piece of furniture turns out to be.
Yes.
It can either, you could have a wonderfully designed piece of furniture, and if you choose the wrong species of wood, it's going to be just a dumpster fire. maybe not that bad.
But it's probably also why a lot of woodworkers accumulate wood, over time, is that, what you have just isn't right for what you want to build, and you wind up stockpiling
sure.
stuff that's, I bought a lot of wood over the past couple of years just through, people who had given up the craft or were moving. So I've got a huge pile of wood, and I'm like, what am I going to build with this?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Got to the point, like if someone gave me a bunch of wood and it was clear I was not going to, it's like, I'm not going to bake anything. I just cut it up and burn it.
Yeah.
Keep me warm at least, it's, you gotta, it's a hard thing to get to that point where lumber selection becomes you're as cognizant about it as you are about other things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
you talked about designing furniture and then choosing the wrong wood. I really think that if you're designing effectively, you're designing with that wood in
Yes,
mind.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
For
it's funny
sure.
because I'm with this cabinet that I'm building. It's all based on what I've seen and what I've experienced with the mix of woods that I'm using. So, it's an evolution, I guess, of my woodworking. Is I'm actually really giving a whole lot more thought to the grain and the wood.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I've got a stockpile of wood that I don't want to use anymore.
Cool.
Ben, do you want some?
I got a fireplace. Send it my way. Keep me warm.
All right. Let's move on to question number 4. This one is from Fred. And Fred asks, does tung oil have a shelf life? I've had some and went to use it the other day, and it had the consistency of honey. Is it okay, or should I get rid of it and get a new bottle?
It does have a shelf life.
It does.
Does it?
Yeah, it starts to get goopy. If you, I don't know if it's from oxidation or whatever, but it's just like Waterlocks does.
Yeah.
If you let it sit and Waterlocks gets air in it, it gets kind of thick.
Oh,
And
yeah, that
goopy.
actually gets that skin on top.
Skin
Actually, the
on.
whole thing starts to gel all the way through
Yeah.
after a while.
And we
And
did an
tung oil will
article.
do that.
We did an article on does your shelf life have does your finish have a shelf
Yeah.
life? Can't remember who was the author. Was it Minnick or? We'll have to look it up.
No,
I
I'm
think it's an
talking
oldie moldy.
I mean, I'm talking about 100% tung oil, which you can still buy. I don't know about stuff they call tung oil and you buy it at the box store or whatever, because that's not usually real tung oil. But
It's usually
Right.
a mix of some sort.
yeah, but 100% tung oil, I had some, and that's what I initially used as the finish when I started woodworking, and it would sort of go bad in a way. Yeah.
But if it was still the consistency of honey, I mean, that's that tried and true linseed oil is about that same consistency. I mean,
Not quite
honey,
that thick.
basically, it's on its way to sort of curing, which I would think, if it's not too far gone, could be a benefit. If you can actually get it on and, wipe it on and get it to level in really, really thin coats, it's probably going to dry really fast for you.
Yeah. Like tried and true, I believe they recommend heating it up a little bit.
Yeah,
Something.
that's just to kind of get it a little less viscous to flow and penetrate a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe you could try that with the tung oil outside, because I don't know if you heat up tung oil, I don't know what'll happen, but there
Yeah.
could be an explosion or a fire.
Yeah,
Could be.
Waterlocks, like it does go bad if you get a little cannon that's half full and you wait. It will start to it will skin over the top. You can bust through it to get to the finish,
Right.
and then after a while, that finish, like I mentioned, will start to gel. But I don't take really good care of my Waterlocks, even though it's somewhat expensive, because when it's about to go bad,
It's better.
oh my gosh, it just goes on and it dries instantly.
Yes.
You can get like 2 or 3 coats on in a day, and that's
Yeah.
perfect. But then, it's like that clock is ticking, that can's going to go off. So.
I do like Waterlocks better too when it started to turn a little bit. It gets
Yeah.
a little thicker. Yeah. Yeah, I like it better then too. Yeah.
Just don't let your shellac get too old or the top will blow off.
You know what I
Yes.
just added to my Waterlocks on a recent rocking chair I'm making?
Tint,
Asphaltum.
asphaltum.
Yes.
I love the word.
Yes. It's awesome.
You're gonna put some Pontypool in there next. There's actually, but if you have like tung oil and you want to keep it around and keep it preserved, or Waterlocks. I've had some Waterlocks in it, like what a platypus bladder is, like for water. Not the actual animal's bladder, but they're like these soft, malleable plastic bladders that you can use for hiking. And you can get something like that. And there's actually Thomas Shrunk. Yeah, not Thomas Church, but Thomas Shrunk.
Right.
Makes a product that we reviewed in the magazine, and I've had a pint of Waterlocks in that thing for like 2 years.
Looks like a little IV bag or
Looks
something.
like an IV bag, yeah. And there's not a single bit of anything going on with it. It is in perfect condition.
So just keep the air out.
Yeah, just keep the air out.
Especially if I'm getting a gallon can, I don't want that going bad because that's a lot of money. I'll use that Bloxygen where it's the inert gas in a can. It feels like you're buying an empty can. You feel really stupid paying money for that. You squirt that in there, put the lid on. However, I was sort of giving a kind of a lecture on finishes, and I mentioned that, and a lot of people in the audience who knew way more about finishing than I did, which was unfortunate for all concerned. But they mentioned getting the little dust off aerosol cans that you get at Staples for spraying off computer parts and stuff. It's the same stuff. You get a little 3-pack.
really?
It's a lot cheaper. That's an inert gas. You can spray that in your finishes to keep it from going bad too.
There.
Just basically keep the oxygen away from that finish.
That's cool
I
too.
don't feel bad. That's just, they're not necessarily anything more about finishing. They're just better shoppers than you are.
No, they knew more about finishing as well.
All right, let's move on to segment number 2. It's time for our all-time favorite furniture of all time for this week. Do you want to hit us up, Mike?
Sure. Speaking of Kevin Rodell, in the issue coming up, he made an arts and crafts bed, which is one of my favorite beds in that style that I've ever seen. It's almost a straight-up stickly style. It's kind of 4-post with wide slats, headboard, footboard, and the posts sort of taper a little bit at the top, and it's a stickly piece I've seen before. But what Kevin has done, he's incorporated some really nice kind of Macintosh style inlay across the slats of the head and footboard, and it really elevates it to its own design. And I actually came across this thing at least 10 years ago. I really, really liked the piece, and I really wanted to get it into the magazine for selfish reasons because I wanted to know how he did that inlay technique. And in the past, he's going like, yeah, no, figure out yourself. I'm not going to tell you. So, but fortunately for us, he had a change of heart, and we are doing the bed, and he is also doing a master class on that inlay technique, which I'm really excited about.
And a video.
And a video as well.
Yeah.
Ben is nodding his head. Yes, he is. So it's a really beautiful bed. It's another. It's a nice sort of example of Kevin's genius in that he's one of my favorite arts and crafts designers, because I think it's really difficult to work in that style but do something original but still fits within that style. And this is one of those pieces, like all of his work, which is definitely an original piece, and very much sort of a Kevin Rodell piece, but also very much in keeping with his style as well.
Yeah, it's highly recognizable.
Yeah.
As arts and crafts. Another thing that's really wonderful about Kevin, we were talking about being efficient before, is that he is a super efficient pro woodworker.
Yes.
I mean, he will use by any means necessary to get the job done, breaking up belt sanders, and he's just, hey, get it done fast, and hope you come away with a profit.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
How about you, Matt?
Want me to go?
Yeah.
All right, so I might be about to give the all-time worst answer to any question like this we've had. This is the ultimate Pekovich answer, because my favorite all-time piece of furniture of all time for this week is actually not a piece of furniture at all. It is a stained glass window by Frank Lloyd Wright.
That is not. I wouldn't know. This is a Matt Kenny answer.
This is, but I was trying to think about what my answer would be today, and this is the stained glass window from the Coonley Playhouse, and this piece of stained glass has been hugely influential on my own work. And if you look at it, maybe you could sort of guess why. I mean, there's lots of primary colors, which I really use a lot of. And then there's also nice geometric patterns being created by the lead, right? So I first saw this window probably 15 years ago at least. And when I saw it, I fell in love with it. And I would try to design things that incorporated, like colored circles and things like that. And it never quite worked, so I couldn't just directly rip it off.
Right.
But it did eventually show up in my work in that I now use, milk paints in primary colors or basic colors and fabrics, and I use drawers and doors to create geometric patterns on the face or top of something, and it's just a hugely influential piece for me. It's my favorite piece of furniture all the time. Oh, a window's sort of a piece of furniture.
No, that's cool. I'm down with it because it was a big influence. Actually, I think there's another parallel to your work in that Frank Lloyd Wright, in doing his stained glass windows, there's a very modernist contemporary flair to them where he's working in a traditional medium, stained glass, especially at that time. You're thinking like Tiffany glass windows or church windows. And here he's pulling out this sort of minimalist Art Deco, influenced, almost, modern art take on that. So he's taking a traditional medium, but also putting his own contemporary sensibility to it, which is what you're doing with milk paint and some of the other design elements you use too. So makes a lot of sense.
I guess so.
A lot of sense.
Yeah, so that piece is huge. There's another, for the next time we do this, I have another piece, another arts and crafts piece. This is sort of arts and crafts a little bit. Prairie, I don't know what they call it, Mission.
Yeah, it is sort of Mission. I would say he was heavily influenced kind of as much by Art Deco as the traditional arts and crafts movement.
Yeah, there's a Macintosh piece that I love, but I on the way to work today, I was like, I don't have that book with me at work, so I couldn't use it. So next time.
Cool.
Awesome.
You got it, Tom.
Well, this is our first week back from vacation, the holidays. And so
some of you had vacations.
I was trying to
not everybody
catch up with this early morning podcast. So I found this special publication that we did probably close to 9 years ago. It's called Furniture, 102 Contemporary Designs. And I came across this piece by Clark Kellogg, and he titled it 10 Small Boxes Huddled Together for Warmth. And one of the things I really like about this piece is that it's a series of boxes, mitered boxes, and it's a very simple appearance, but it's very careful. He did a lot of things that I'm starting to play with now in terms of setbacks and playing with dimensions of parts. He's got these wonderful mitered boxes that are just kind of stacked, what looks to be in a random order, but from, you read about the design, and he had a really careful thought process behind it and how he created different shadow lines, and all using basically the same mitered box form. Some are like basically have a drawer, others will be a door, others are wide open. And I love the way he sort of was working through the design, and I'll take the quote from the article. In terms of when he was drawing it out, he says, "The more I drew, the more I started thinking about each box as a living thing. I had a great time thinking about all the little rules that would govern how the boxes should live together. Once the rules were in place, it felt like the cabinet practically drew itself." And that's sort of the fun part I think about. The more the more I design, I try to design. The fun part is when you suddenly open up doors and you start experimenting with like a core idea, and then when you see it all come together, it's like a magical moment. And I just love this piece, and it, I could see it fitting on almost any wall, and you can do almost anything you want with it. By just keeping the same construction method and doing it cleanly, you can just create some magic. Mm-hmm. Actually, Matt, you're going out to see Clark for another article.
I am, yeah. I've worked with Clark before, and I'm going down there after, I'm supposed to be going down in the beginning of February. We'll have to talk about that.
But Clark is also, if you want to watch a guy doing some great work, he's pretty active on Instagram for sure. And
Clark's a great designer and great furniture maker. He's awesome. Yeah.
Anyhow,
and he's been on the podcast before. Remember, we interviewed him on the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Clark.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Let's
Clark.
move on. What's that?
Clark. I always think of National Lampoon's Vacation. Sorry. When anyone says Clark. That's terrible.
Clark's not like that, Clark.
No, he's not at all.
Let's get back to the questions. This one comes from Christian, and he says, Do you have any good dust collection solutions for older table saws? I have a Watkin AGS 10 from the late 1960s where the motor side of the saw is completely open and there's a little material to attach an auxiliary motor cover to. Have any of you ever attempted building enclosures to deal with dust collection? Is there anything else I can do?
I've done this.
You have?
Yep.
I need to do it. I have a contractor saw and I need to, cover up some gaping holes.
Yeah,
Contractor saws are kind of tough.
It's
Usually they have
the motor
like
sits outside and I've got a...
Right.
There's that little saw diaper you put on the bottom. I've
No,
seen
this
those.
one doesn't have a diaper. This has it's
Saw
actually enclosed
diaper.
on the bottom. So
Okay.
there's a plastic shroud with a dust port underneath, a 4-inch dust port.
okay.
But it, the efficiency is not there because the whole back of the saw is
Right.
wide open and the motor sticks there. So you've got to get around the pulley and everything.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about going. We did an article a few years ago
On
about
both a cabinet saw and a
Yeah.
contractor saw, showed you how to close them up.
Yeah, so I was thinking of adapting one of those. We'll have to have Ben post the article link. I don't remember what the title or when it appeared, but
Wasn't it by the guy that lives out on the San Juan Islands? Was his name Dick Babbitt?
was it Dick Babbitt? It could have been.
I
Because I
it
think
was.
Mark Schofield
Yeah.
was the editor on that.
Right.
So
But I've done this, and first let's all agree we're never going to say the word saw diaper
Well,
on
they
the
actually saw
podcast
the
again. I know what you're talking
Okay.
about. We're just not going to say saw diaper.
Oof, okay.
Yeah,
why not?
because
It's perfectly clear what it is.
because it's a little upsetting. But I don't know why, but I find it very upsetting. I've done this I have a 1969 or 70 Unisaw, and I wanted dust collection on it. So the first thing I did, it did not have an enclosure on the motor side. So I basically made an MDF cover,
Yes.
box that fits over it. And on my saw, I screwed a ledger strip beneath it, and then put rare earth magnets inside the rim, around the rim of it, and that just holds it to the cabinet.
Cool.
And I also routed slots in it to allow air to come in through there.
Yes.
And so the air comes in through there in theory and helps pull air down.
Cools the motor.
Cools the motor, yeah. And then inside the cabinet, and this worked well for a while, but then it didn't work at all, was I took the table off and I cut pieces of of the stuff they make boxes from, cardboard. And
Oh, that.
that's and I cut that and I taped it around the inside of the cabinet, and I sort of angled it so that the little dust door on the front would have some of the vents open, but not all the vents open, and it would come so air would be sucked in through that dust door over the the dust falls down, air's coming in, and it should create a current that goes back to a dust port that I cut and put in the back of the cabinet all the way at the bottom.
Right.
And so in theory, you had like all this air current coming in from the dust door, from the motor cover, and then all of my zero clearance inserts, I would drill a couple of holes in to also allow that, because when you put a dust collector up to a table saw, you're sucking a lot of air.
Yeah.
And you got to get air from somewhere. So you can't close it off completely. So you use the holes to direct the airflow to the past the dust and down to the dust port.
Right.
And it worked really well, except the cardboard and all the dust and the tape. It just didn't want to stay in there. So eventually I got really angry and just yanked it all out.
I tried something. I tried some sheet magnet material to try to cover up the hole in the back, because I wanted to do something like that box, but I don't have enough material on the saw to attach like a ledger strip. There's just not enough room top or bottom, so I'm sort of limited. And I tried these magnetic sheets, and the stuff I bought just wasn't
Magnetic
thick enough,
enough,
and
yeah.
it kind of fell off, and it looked like
bonk, bonk, bonk.
But I did discover there is a thicker material
say
out there.
that.
Why not?
It's not a thing you should say.
But it looked bad.
It looked bad.
So I may try something similar again, or I just, I don't know. I've been using my table saw less and less these past couple of years since I have such a better bandsaw. So I don't know.
Yeah, the
But
best
Mike,
thing you can
Mike
do.
has a brand new saw
Yeah, the
stop,
best
so
thing you can do is just get a
just
new
buy a new
saw. and
saw
just
stop.
Oh
go right.
man, that's sweet. But yeah, I had the unisaw with the open big hole where the motor is, and I made that sort of big boxy thing and tacked it on there as well. What's really important when you're sizing that is to accommodate the entire travel
Of the motor.
the motor up
Yeah.
and down.
Good point.
It's quite possible that Ben's table saw, the blade won't quite go below the table saw surface. So
That's fantastic.
yeah, he may have to do a little adjustment there.
He's taking notes right now.
Yeah.
you tell.
Yeah, every now and then, when I tilt the blade and bring it back,
Yeah.
the motor will hit that thing and knock it off. But it actually, I mean, I actually knew that when I made it, so I do. It does accommodate the full range of motion,
Huh.
but just every now and then, somehow, for some reason, it hits it and knocks that thing off, and I get angry.
Yeah.
I think I got to save up some money for a new saw.
I also forgot to give Ben the little dustpan that fits exactly in the little port that you take the door off. I have a dustpan right for you because no matter what you do, you're still shoveling that thing out
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
every 6 months.
I mean, old machinery is fantastic. I love my unisaw and I love my Oliver 12-inch joiner, but oh my god, the dust collection is just deplorable.
Yeah.
And I have problems with the. I mean, I need to make a better chute for the jointer, but it's just a pain in the butt. Or as Tom would say, it's saw diaper.
I never said that. Oh, there goes Ben.
I got extra time to edit.
All right, let's
Don't be such a saw diaper.
And Matt finally woke up this morning. Welcome back.
Here come the censors. Let's move on before it's too late to get to our last question. This one is from Martin. And Martin says, I use milk paint. Sometimes when mixing it, I'll get a floating powder that doesn't blend without heroic stirring. I love that phrase. And sometimes I get a stiff froth that will not disappear even after hours. I'm not sure whether this is an issue with the water, the paint brand, the paint color, or just bad karma. Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I've got ideas, but I can't say any of them.
Was it froth?
Well, so if he's mixing a powder, he's got to be using the same brand that I use. So one thing you can do is when you get the powder, before you put any water in it, sort of smash it up. You know, like maybe the mortise and pestle
Okay.
or mortise and pesto. But
Mortise and pedestal?
yeah, mortise and pedestal. But you could smush it up to get rid of the big
I think
chunks.
it's a mortar and pestle.
Mortise.
It's a mortar and pestle. I know, Mike. I'm just being a saw diaper.
We have a running theme. Are we running behind?
Poor Ben's gonna have to edit out all that cussing. One thing you can do is that. The other thing is I always mix with hot water. It seems to work a little bit better. And also something else you can do is instead of mixing the full amount, initially mix like half the water that you need, and it'll be thick. But I found that it tends to mix a little bit better that way.
Yeah.
And the froth, I believe, I've experienced that, but not in ages. And I can't remember what it is that causes it. But I do not get it now. So try mixing with hot water. That seems to work really well for me, hot water.
Do you ever strain it?
I never do strain it, and you can still get little clumps down at the bottom. But I don't strain it. The other thing you can do, which I found helps a little bit, is actually to mix in a little more water than it's called for, and let it sit for a little bit longer, or go back and add more powder. Because so you try hot water. Try first mixing it with like half the amount of water they call for, and then add in more water. Or, and this is completely crazy because it's counter to what I just told you, but try adding more water than's called for initially. I have found that the powders and the viscosity that is produced by adding the recommended amount of water varies from not only color to color, but also from batch to batch. So it's in some cases, it's just a matter of figuring out what this batch needs. I know that, for example, the yellow that I have right now, if I add in the recommended amount of water, it's going to come out kind of thick. And the blue is going to come out kind of thin. So it's just, I have no explanation for that because I just deal with it. So that's what, those are some things you could try. The froth, I think, comes from letting it sit or something.
The rare times I've used it, I did get the froth, but I didn't care because, the milk paint, it's not like this really pristine finish. It's kind of nasty anyway. And I like sort of like the little drips and clumps and whatever, because for me it added a lot of. You're doing something more refined. I was doing like Windsor chairs or old toy chest or something like that, where I wanted the character, that milk paint, and all those little nasties. I thought kind of enhanced the look of it.
I like the variegated color that you get with milk paint, and I like it sort of has an implied texture to it.
Yeah.
And I like all that stuff, but I also, I sand between coats, and I try to get a very smooth, clean surface that yet still has that character of those characteristics of milk paint.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You know what a good milk paint substitute is? Get a flat latex paint in whatever color you want, because there's like a billion colors. It looks really, really dead, and then you steel wool and wax it.
Yeah.
And I did a bathroom vanity. I didn't want to do a whole milk paint thing. I tried that. It looks really, really cool.
Yeah.
So
and it doesn't
we'll agree to disagree on that.
and it doesn't get sticky. You know how when you use latex paint on a bookcase or something,
yes,
over time it gets a little sticky. I actually, you told me that when I was making some bookcases for Shannon. You gave me that tip, and I did the same thing.
It's just that there's a certain chalkiness to a finished milk paint surface that even flat latex doesn't quite get. And also flat latex has a very consistent color.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's very, very clean.
And milk paint always has some variation in the color.
Yes.
On a surface.
And if it's a piece that gets used a lot, like I have some Windsor chairs with milk paint finishes, the areas of higher use, they develop a darker sort of a patina, a higher sheen to it. And actually, like on the armrest, it actually starts to wear through to the bare wood, and all of that stuff I think looks really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I was going to wait for you to say something about the seat, but
no. I've given Ben enough trouble this morning.
He has no comment. He's very happy today.
I'm all full of sass.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in a couple weeks for our next episode. Remember to send your questions and comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. And please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on the web at shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop. Giddy up. Here come the letters.
I think you can say saw diaper. Can't we say saw diaper?